We're good.
Okay, cool.
We're live.
Sweet. Hey everyone, so today we're going to do our second tutorial on Rhino. I'm titling it Plugging into Grasshopper, although it's like also going to be like called Rhino. So today we'll cover methods for producing graphics for presentations. And I think we may have covered that last week, like the make 2D command, but if we didn't, then today will be like pretty helpful. And that's helpful for producing plans, like any type of two-dimensional drawing from like a 3D object. So like even axonometric diagrams, stuff like that. And then I'll show you like how to import that into Illustrator. So it actually gets like surprisingly complicated for some reason. I even struggle with it like all the time. But there's like one method that may help out with that. And then moving into Grasshopper, I'll probably just show some, I guess just like a really quick like intro into Grasshopper, like what it is. I don't really understand it fully, so I know Heather's taken some classes on this, so if she has any input, or if you have anything you could add, definitely. But yeah, maybe show some definitions I've used that like kind of create different things. One I'm thinking of specifically is like a rig model I made, so that can maybe give you an idea of how Grasshopper is a tool for fabrication as well as like modeling. And then yeah, feel free to email me, even though I know like Molly also asked me too. So again, so we covered like some good to know commands for like surface modeling and like importing point clouds and creating terrain. Just went through what we'll go through today, but I think workshop number 3 will be like setting up views and looking at other like rendering plugins like Lumion. So just like a walkthrough of that. So this was like an illustration I made for Studio last term. So this was just like inspired by a dissertation by Scott Byram. So he was studying the Coos native tribe and like their methods for fishing. So this kind of gives you the idea like as to what you can do, I think, as like a landscape architect in terms of like conveying information through modeling and graphics. So I went through this like the first workshop last term, but algorithmic gated designs use some specific algorithm editors, also known as like parametric design. So it's like utilizing like numbers as a way to design, which is kind of boring to be honest, but it does produce interesting like results, like generative results, as far as landscape architecture goes. So we won't really get that deep into it today, but like off the top of my head, like Maya Lynn is a good example as far as like landform goes. Like she would use Grasshopper to like produce like waves, or her whole wave study that she did. So just to give you an idea of like what you can do with that through numbers and science. This is just a video I made really quick. So that's like a typical definition. So it can get like really complicated looking. But once you like kind of get used to some of the language, some of the Rhino, it becomes more usable. So in this example, it's just like telling these circles to shrink in size when this curve like gets close to it. So yeah. So it's kind of cool to be able to like just script something and like use it in different applications, or like in different ways. Like if that like line were to symbolize water or something, or like maybe the peak of a hill and like the diameter of those circles like represent like drainage. I don't know, that's just like a weird example. But then moving into digital fabrication, so we kind of went over like setting up a laser cut file last week. But rig models you can generate like pretty automatically through Grasshopper as well. So you can always model it, and it does take a good amount of time to script up a rig model definition. So like modeling it, you're not saving that much time, but in the end you could always bring that definition back into Rhino and use it on another surface or mesh that you create. Yeah, so let's get started. So I guess I'll start with like the make 2D command. So yeah, that basically, and I'll show you what that does, but it basically projects 3D objects onto the 2D plane. So I'm going to make a really simple cube. So I just put the rectangle command, and I'm going to specify the base point to be at 0, 0, which is is the origin, and then we do 10 feet by 10 feet. So just making a 10 foot by 10 foot square, and then I'm going to extrude it 10 feet up. So right now it's in wireframe, but if I were to go to shaded, you know, it would be like an open cube. So with the make 2D command, what you're doing is you're taking the view of this object and you're just projecting it. So if I were to select it and say make 2D, it's going to take this view and project it as a 2D object. So if I were to go look at that, it's completely flattened. And that's really helpful when you're trying to generate line work for axonometric views, or even for rendering. If you have a perspective set up, you can kind of get your line work, which sometimes is a nice technique to accentuate certain things in your rendering. So that's an example of looking at it in an open cube, I guess. But if we were to close that cube by using the cap command, you'll see that the inside line that was once visible is not visible. So that concept is pretty simple to understand. But I think it's just helpful to know that like it's going to hide your line work. What you don't see like won't show up. So yeah, let me make more maybe complicated geometry really quick. So I'm going to use a curve. This will be like a crazy fence. So I'm going to use land design. Create a fence from this curve. So kind of similar to the plant interface, it's going to give you like all these parameters that you can set up. In a way, this is parametric design because you could adjust the separation of these planks via a number, but for now I'm just going to keep the default. So it's going to create this like really wacky fence. So we now have this like kind of more complicated geometry to look at. So if I wanted to kind of get a perspective with that fence view and use the make 2D command, you'll see that it'll take definitely a lot longer to process. But again, it'll flatten that view. So if you do have like meshes or geometry and you're trying to set up like really quick renderings, you can always use this as a tool to like bring into Photoshop or Illustrator and start to kind of render it up or use it as a diagram. So kind of similar to that one example of the Goose Tribe, that's kind of the idea as to how to create those diagrams. So if I wanted to bring this into Illustrator.
Aaron, can I ask a question?
Oh yeah.
Can you save views in Rhino?
Yes, you can. And I should go over that today. I think that makes sense.
Like if you wanted to make a fence and then you're making like a bench and you want to save a 2D from that same angle.
Yeah. So what you'd want to do is use a command called named view, but you can also find it on your panels interface over here. So that's actually already selected, named views. So if I were to go to any view and activate it so that this is like kind of highlighted, I'm going to delete this really quick. And I were to like save as, I can save this as like fence view. And this is like really helpful just even in like modeling, because a lot of times I'll like move around and be like, oh my god, or even if I am in the process of rendering something, I'll be like, I did not have that saved, and it's like impossible to get back to that view perfectly. So you can just double click that and it'll bring you right back to that view. Another thing that's helpful too within your view tab is you can set your views to your top view, which is a plan, which as you can see is over here, but you can also set it to an isometric view. So that would be more like an axonometric view. So this is parallel. So if I were to save this, I don't want to overwrite my already saved view, so I'll do axon. So even if I'm in an isometric view, I can quickly jump out into the fence view, into that isometric view. So it's still changing it from perspective to axon, if that makes sense. Yeah. So, hey Jennifer.
And obviously, like, once you save those, I mean, they're static. You can't continue to work with them, or can you? Are they static images?
Yeah, that's a really great question. What I would say is like if you're like, oh, I need to move this from the northeast view to the like northwest view, going down the isometric. So we were like set at northeast. You could always like overwrite it, so this is still axon, and it'll like tell you, hey, you're gonna overwrite this, so that now that's still saved. So you can always like do that. Yeah. So I'm gonna go back to our fence view in perspective, and do the make 2D command. And one thing I keep like glazing over is this like dialog. So you can always change your view in this drop down. Typically, like whatever's activated is like what will be default. And you kind of you can keep this like pretty much as default, but sometimes I found that your object properties will be like, you know, change all of these layers into into like one singular layer, if that makes sense. So if you keep maintain source layers on, and what I'm going to do really quick is I'm going to change a couple of these posts to another layer. So in my layer panel, I'm just going to say change object layer. So if I do make 2D and I keep maintain source layer on, it's going to create a projection of this with, you know, those as separate layers. So when you bring that into Illustrator, this line work will be on a separate layer completely, so you can use that and change it accordingly. So that's just like a specific thing about that. But so going back to this, and I don't want this to be in perspective of this view. So make 2D again. And a lot of the times, it's just going to like project it center to your view in the top plan, or in the plan view. So as you can see, you know, this is kind of like overlapping the model right now. It stays selected. So if for some reason like it disappears like out of view after you make 2D, and I'll do that really quickly. If your like plan is like really zoomed out, you're in your fence view, and you make 2D, it's still going to be selected in plan, so you can always use that zoom selected tool up here in your plan view. So that's kind of the basics on Make 2D. And the next part of the process would be exporting it into Illustrator. So what you want to do is select the objects you want to export and type in export into the command line. I'm just going to save this onto my desktop. And the save as type, so I think I discussed this like in fall term, but Rhino is like kind of has this huge umbrella of like different programs it can like connect to in terms of like writing files. I'm not really sure why they get all that like the rights to do that, but they do, which is pretty sweet. So you know, you can see AutoCAD, so you can export this fence drawing like straight into AutoCAD. You can also do Illustrator. So let's do Illustrator for now. I'm just going to name it fence and export, and it's going to give you this option. So it's going to give you like the option to scale it. So in this model, we're using feet. So of course, 1 inch will equal a foot in the drawing scale that we're creating. So if we just press OK, I'm going to open this up in Illustrator.
Version of Illustrator is that? I haven't seen that drawing.
I think it's 2020. Yeah, maybe. Or 2017, JK. Yeah.
What was it?
I thought it was a beach. It's like the landscape. Yeah. Like ocean. Is it an astronaut? Yeah. That's interesting.
So I'm going to open the fence drawing we created. And you'll see that it is not in the artboard. So this will keep happening to you forever if you're using this process. Yeah. So as you can see, drawing got moved over is like right outside the artboard area, which sometimes Illustrator freaks out about. It's like, oh, I can't move this because it is completely off the drawing area. So you're kind of like doomed. You could always like cut and paste, like kind of move your view around and like paste it. So like that's one method of getting it back over. But many a time you're working with like massive like landscape drawings and it's just like literally completely gone off Illustrator. So the method you want to use in Rhino is just simply the move tool. So with all of this selected, you want to use move. And it's going to ask you to point to move from. So just want to kind of choose a corner or some area of a corner and point to move to. So being that it's a CAD program, the whole entire like model world is set up through like XY coordinates. So origin is of course 0, 0. So that's the point we want to move this object to. So if you use that, it will move you right to the origin. So if you export from the origin, you're going to be able to like open up in Illustrator a lot easier. So I'm going to use the export command again.
And if you do move and then 0, 0 and your object is still like attached to a string moving around, is that, it's not clear, but like I highlighted it and then I did move 0, 0 and it looks like I'm deciding where I'm going to put it.
Right, so when you use move, it's going to like prompt you to choose the point to move from. So did you type 0, 0 then? Or did you like select this point?
Oh, maybe I selected it. And then
Yeah.
0. Okay, got it.
So yeah, it's going to like move it from 0, 0. So I'll do that just as an example. So if I don't select the point and just go straight to 0, 0, you know, it's moving from that origin point. So let me just do that, and then 0, 0. Cool. Support. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So just as an example, I'll show you like how it imports. Whoa. Where'd it go?
Oh, mine was way out too.
Really?
It keeps zooming out.
Yeah, so that's what I mean by it'll drive you crazy. Because that usually works for me, but
Does it
it's
drop
not.
with a layer? That you could grab the layer?
That's a good idea.
You select
And you
all.
still got a lot of real estate to go up and down. I wonder if it's.
I wonder if you try copying the layer and then pasting the layer back, but.
Yeah, maybe I exported at a weird scale, but that should work. It's usually like the 0, 0 in Rhino is like the midpoint of the Illustrator canvas. But maybe this example won't work for some reason. So yes. My desktop is a disaster. It's like pelicans everywhere. Okay, there we go. I don't know what that was about, but this new file, as you can see, like kind of moves. And I guess the origin really is more like the actual origin of the canvas. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone, but it should work. And then of course from there you can utilize the layer panel to like select certain lines that you deemed like a certain color. So this is kind of the, I guess, horizontal support of this fence. So you can always make that like lighter weight. It's going to come in as the color it was called out in Rhino, which was purple. So you can always change that as well. And, you know, how Illustrator works. So you also like change the stroke. So it's always important to like make sure you maintain the source layer because it makes life a lot easier when you're exporting out Rhino. So that's kind of the process with making 2D. Does anyone have questions right now, or we're good? Okay. Hopefully it's pretty simple. So I'm going to go back to what we made last week really quick. So this is that point cloud we used. And I'm just gonna make up the mesh patch of this point cloud right here.
Mesh what?
A mesh patch.
Mesh patch?
Yeah.
What's the word?
Mesh patch, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry.
Not English to me.
Yeah. I'm just gonna like isolate this right now. So yeah, the mesh patch is like really crazy because of the point cloud. This was all from LiDAR. And what we did last week was we created a contour of this mesh patch at like 5 feet. So just to visualize that once more, you know, it's nicely detailed, I think, from if you were to like create actual like topographic changes. But I wanted to like use Grasshopper as a way, or introduce Grasshopper in terms of contouring to y'all because it gives you a little bit more flexibility. So again, this was a contour created through Rhino at 5 feet. And I guess I'll just delete that because we don't really need it. So if I open up Grasshopper, what I can tell Grasshopper to do, and again, this is like very language specific, so if you're interested in learning Grasshopper, it's going to be like, you're going to have to kind of look up videos or kind of use resources. You always ask me, but like you can use some online resources to like, yeah, kind of figure it out. So because we know that this was a mesh due to the mesh patch, we can just kind of quickly double click in the interface in Grasshopper and type in mesh, and that will bring up this like node essentially, or what's called a component in terms of Grasshopper. So right now this is just an empty mesh component. It's telling you that there's a floating parameter, so that means nothing is connected to this mesh component. So what you want to do is you want to like right click that component and say set one mesh, and you'll select your mesh, and now it's all green and happy, and it'll even like kind of show you, you know, when you have it selected, like what your mesh is. So I guess like Grasshopper is like basically Python language, or it's that idea of like coding, but it's like a visual interface to do that. And I've never used like the model builder in GIS, but like from my understanding, it's like kind of similar. But like it's, you can kind of create these like components and connect them, and again, it gets really confusing quickly, but I'll show you why it's kind of magical. So you have your mesh defined as that surface, and you use the component contour. And we're just going to use this one right here. And as you can see, it's broken into all these different little nodes called direction, distance, your point from where you're starting, as well as your shape. So you're going to bring your mesh into that shape. And you're going to create a unit Y component, or sorry, a unit Z component. I'm going to show you what all this means in a second. You're also going to create a slider, and you do that by doing like a number, a less than sign, and then the range at which you want to go to. So let's say 0 to 10. You're going to plug that in. And it's like freaking out because your distance is set at 0, and it's like, that doesn't make sense if you're trying to create contours. So if we were to set this to 10 feet,